Welcome in, everybody, to the Birds 365, a game day edition of Birds 365. Eagles taking on the Patriots tonight for preseason game number 2. Johnny Mac and I will preview that game right now. John, what's your expectations of the game tonight? We'll get into some individual players we're watching, but overall, what's your expectation of the game tonight?
I never have expectations of a preseason game.
Not in preseason.
Because, yeah, I mean, it is what it is, and you're not dealing with the key contributors and the key players. So, but, you know, for the sickos that do like to bet preseason games, make sure you do it at BetUS. So I will say that. But there's never any expectations. Just, you know, guys trying to better their stuff around on film. So whether it's the Eagles or somebody else around the NFL might try to take a flyer on them, might try to advance their career. So that's what preseason football is about. It's about those guys, especially now in the modern environment. And I did my 5 players that have a chance to improve their standing. So I'll go with those guys. Number 1 would be Marlon Tuipulotu, which I think started in the practice. He was one of the guys. Well, everybody. I mean, I just told you with Greg Bedard with the 14 sacks. I mean, everybody was having a big day on the Eagles defensive front. But I thought it was notable when Vic was asked about the backup nose tackle position last week, or it was actually over the weekend. He didn't mention Marlon, who in theory is the backup to Jordan Davis. He even said, well, maybe we'll have to play Milton Williams some snaps there, which Milton is not a nose tackle. And when he was given that information, he kind of went, really? So Marlon has a chance, bigger body, you know, continue to play well, continue to stack those good days, and get back into that conversation, since I think he's the most obvious nose tackle backup on this team. Tyler Steen is another. The one thing, if you call across the reports, and we'll talk to BLG about this in hour 2, because he was there. The one issue with the Eagles offense was the interior of the offensive line. And it was usually, when people were talking about it, was usually 77, Mekhi Becton. I think it's way too early to assume somebody that size can excel at right guard inside rather than outside a tackle. So I think there's still an opportunity for Tyler Steen to continue to play well. The problem is he keeps limping. So I don't think he's 100%. He's out there because he knew he had to get back out there. And I'm a little surprised the Eagles have gone down that route, but it is what it is. And he'll need to be a reserve even if he doesn't get back in the right guard conversation. That means he's going to have to start taking tackle reps, which Nick Sirianni said. And I think he's more comfortable with that. So he's a guy. And then when you start getting further down, JAKIB Harris is one. He's one of the wide receivers, the back end wide receivers. I've talked about him a couple times. He's 6'5", but he runs a 4.39. He's really fast. So he's a big deal on special teams. And Michael Clay's been using him as a gunner, and he's been using him on kickoff coverage now that Grant Calcaterra's hurt. So if he can make a play at wide receiver or 2, and I always talk about Eli Ricks in Baltimore, you know, he can get in that conversation to be on the back end of this roster, because nobody's standing out, whether it's when you talk about that outside backup position. Ultimately, I do think the Eagles are going to go outside the organization and get somebody. But if they don't, why not JAKIB Harris? But he's got to make some plays. And then Tristan McMullen, for the same reason at safety. He had a good preseason opener at Baltimore. And if he continues to play well and the Eagles move on from James Bradbury, They play it cautious with Sidney Brown to start the season. They play it cautious with Caden Stearns to start the season. He's got a chance to sneak on that 53-man roster as well. But the centerpiece for me, and I left him for last, is Jeremiah Trotter Jr., because he's going to play. And I think he can get meaningful snaps on this team very, very early. If he finishes strongly this camp, and that means play well tonight, that means continue to play well in practice, that means he'll play against Minnesota because he has to as a backup. The more he plays well, the more there's a chance that he gets on the field because of what's going on at the linebacker position.
Yeah, no doubt. He's definitely one of the guys in the sights tonight. I think you think he'll play a lot, John? I mean, how much you think he will play tonight?
I think he played 19. No, he played 29. He played 29 reps against Baltimore. I think he'll be over 20 again. So plenty of time to show what he can do. And that's a good thing. The more Vic gets to see him, the more he plays well. Now he's got to play well. That's part of it as well. If he plays poorly, that's going to put him back at the back of the line, and he'll say, "All right, he's a rookie. He's not going to get cut. He's going to make the team, but he needs more time." But if he continues to play well, and there's a perfect opportunity because that Patriots team is not great. They're going to be open to the idea of him getting more and more snaps.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing with him tonight. I think he's going to be a guy that's out there a lot. A couple other guys I'm looking at. I thought yours were pretty good. Marlon was a good one too. I would add Moro Jomo. I don't know how much he'll play tonight, but I would add him as another guy. You've heard a lot of people talk about we need more depth at defensive tackle. Well, right now it's Tui Pelotu and Jomo, right? Those are your two main depth guys at that position. So I think I'm looking for him to see if he can do something. I'm looking for Jalix Hunt tonight. I want to see what Jalix Hunt can do. And that's really it. I mean, maybe a couple of other guys. And John, our guy, Johnny Wilson, how much will he play tonight?
Yeah, he's going to play a ton as well. And I'm not as high on Johnny Wilson as other people. But yeah, I mean, he's a young player. He's going to play. That's why I don't think he's relevant. Other than what I sort of said about Jalix Hunt on the defensive side, he might be somebody you use in the red zone. He might be somebody you use very situationally. But the reason why I think they're going outside the organization at wide receiver 3 is not because they need somebody to play when AJ and Devontae are out there. It's because if those guys get hurt and miss a game or two, you need somebody to be able to play 60, 70 snaps and at least be competent. And they don't have that right now outside the numbers. So I think it's more about that. It's more about being the backup outside than being the slot receiver. I think they could piecemeal it together with the slot with a bunch of different guys, and it's not a high traffic position anyway. So I'm not as concerned with that, but you do need some better depth with the outside receivers.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing with all those. Ask people in the chat, John. The one guy I do think that will play tonight, I don't know how much, would be Nakobe Dean. How much do you think he'll play tonight?
That's interesting because they made the move on Tuesday.
Yeah, to put him at first team.
Yeah. I think he'll play. He played 19 snaps in the opener. I don't think he'll play that much. But I think he'll play a little bit. And he needs to continue to play well. It's not like that has been decided or he's going to be the starter week 1. I only think he's going to be the starter week 1 because he's the Eagles' best linebacker. So not that he's Fred Warner, but he's the Eagles' best linebacker. So as long as he's healthy, he'll show that over the snaps he does get, and I believe he'll be out there against the Packers. But I do expect him to play some, not a ton. And he's no longer a deference player as he once was with this team. But a lot of the defenders, you would think Jalen Carter's a deference player, but he played last week. Vic's
Yeah,
a little
I
bit
would feel
different.
no need to get him out there tonight.
Well, I agree, but Vic's a little bit different. So you can't just assume. Ultimately, I think they'll convince him, look, it's not worth it. Series, you got to see him for a series. That was this whole thing. Players don't like to show up week one and not play and have that be their first rep of the season. All right, well, you got that over with in Baltimore. There's no reason to play Jalen Carter in the preseason games. But you got to convince Vic of that. I think they'll be able to do it. But, I leave the door slightly ajar to say he might play 4 snaps, 3 and out, and then be done.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing with him tonight. A lot of good. There still is some good players to watch, John. The other thing I'll be watching is the special teams. I think you turned out to be right on. You're gonna turn out to be right on this. It might be a bunch more touchbacks. Same thing. It's just everybody's lined up a little bit differently, and all the kickoff returns I've seen so far have been like to the 25 or 30. So not much add on, but I will be watching that tonight. I think there's still something to learn from that with the NFL team. So I'll be interested.
Yeah, well,
to see how
but
they play
the most interesting, they all act like, oh, we don't know, we don't want to show it. The Eagles, especially because of their competitive advantage, and they all show up and they do the exact same thing. It's hilarious to me. Every team, they do the exact same thing. They have the dual returners. Wherever they kick the ball, the other one becomes the lead blocker. Every single one has done the same thing. And if you do have a good kick returner, Devin Hester's of the world, Cordero Patterson's of the world, and they break one, you're going to see touchback after touchback after touchback, and they'll trade. The only difference is touchback used to be at the 25, now it's at the 30. So you're giving up 5 yards. Originally, when they proposed the rule, they were going to take it out to the 35, and that became problematic because they thought teams wouldn't pass it because they'd be concerned with losing that much field position. I think they'll give up 5 yards if it's Cordero Patterson out there. If it's Kenny Gainwell and Isaiah Rodgers, that's who the Eagles are using. They're not going to give up that field position unless you make them prove it. And if you do, they'll just kick it out. And you'll start at the 30.
Yeah, so we'll see what they'll able to, we'll see how they play that tonight, John. I did look at your preseason article tonight. By the way, the game tonight, we don't have Jeff Kerr here to give us the rundown on how to watch this thing.
It's not cozy. It's NBC 10.
It's NBC 10, and then I think it's NFL Network if you're not in the area. I think that's the breakdown of it. So you don't have to worry about cozy TV for those who
never have to worry about cozy TV again. I can't say that 100%, but
I'll tell you what, John, I was doing a live stream of the game on last Friday, I guess it was, and I'm watching, and there's a dude in the chat who's like 3 plays ahead or 2 plays ahead, and I'm like, man, where are you watching it? I'm watching it on the network television, and he's like, I'm on Cozy TV. I'm like, you got to be kidding me! Cozy TV had the fastest feed of all of them. Last week.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about watching on TV. It's usually on a delay, and some are more delayed than others. So you'll see that little bit of lag time. But yeah, I don't know I don't know anything. I still know nothing about Cozy TV.
Yeah, we don't know anything about Cozy TV. So I didn't watch it on there. But tonight it's on NBC 10 if you're in Philly, and it's on NFL Network. So you can be watching it on there, and we will see, what ends up happening tonight. How do you think the quarterbacks will go tonight, John? You think Kenny Pickett will play as much as he did in the first preseason game?
Yeah, I think Kenny will get the first half, and he came out for the third quarter. Yeah, maybe similar. You might even get to see some Will Grier tonight. I don't know if that's a positive. If they want to play Will Grier, maybe Kenny plays a quarter and a half, and they go to Tanner McKee, and then you finish it up with Will Greer, which is a possibility. I don't see the value in that when you're trying to develop. Tanner McKee is a developmental quarterback. Like, I want him out there in the preseason. That's his time to shine. And that's the way I'd go about it. But, Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier like Will Greer a lot. He's followed them. I think he's going to be a future coach. And they might want to get him some time. But, when you have a young quarterback like Tanner McKee, I want to get him as many live reps as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he's got the big arm, so maybe they'll try and push that ball down the field with not a big arm, but he does have a nice arm.
They didn't do it. That's one thing I'll be paying attention. They didn't do it last week, so let's see if they do it this week. And maybe
I'd like to see him get some reps with the twos last week. I mean, he had a lot of drops, and I didn't think that they did him justice having him out there with all the third and
that's the thing. People
do.
That's who you're out there with, and Kenny as well. I mean, he's not out there with the key players either. So, one of the things I talk about a lot is second team reps in the NFL. Forget about games and practice. They tend to shift towards the defense for the reason that defensive line is a rotational position in most cities, and most players, certain guys play all the time. Nick Bosa, Max Crosby, those guys, but very rare. And so most teams have a bunch of defensive front players that can play. And offensive line is, if you're healthy, you're playing all 5 positions. That's not rotational. So the backups don't play a lot, and they tend to struggle against guys who do play. So second team reps can be difficult to evaluate, and people get too much on the backup quarterbacks who are playing in some sticky situations. In other words, Kenny Pickett with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert is going to be better than Kenny Pickett with insert names. And I think a lot of people kind of missed that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. John, another guy I want to ask about tonight, which will be interesting because of the changes from last week, is Zach Baun. Last week, Zach Baun played a series or two, and then he was laughing it up with the starters on the sidelines. Is he a guy that's going to play more tonight because maybe he slipped on the depth chart? Maybe Nakobe Dean's right there. Maybe Trotter Jr. is pushing him to be the third linebacker, and Zach Baun could be in danger of falling to fourth on the totem pole for off-ball linebacker. What do you expect to see from Zach Baun tonight?
I don't expect to see a ton because I think he's still in Vic's mind as a guy who's going to play, whether he's a starter or not. And I've always thought that he would play the Andrew Van Ginkel role that he had in Miami, where you're a hybrid player, essentially, part edge rusher, part off-ball linebacker. Now, Van Ginkel did it at a very high level, and I don't know. I think it's very unlikely that Zach's going to be that good, but I think that's his role. I think he wants that player, that type of player, and I think that's going to be Zach Baun's role to utilize. So I still think he's part of the plan from Vic Fangio's perspective. I think it just changes a little bit, and I don't think he's going to play 40 snaps because he's not the starter anymore. I think everything's going to be very situational with this team in the back seven, depending on the opponent, depending on the situation. Is it 3rd and 13? Is it 3rd and 2? Everything's going to be very situational, except with the defensive front. Everywhere else, you're going to see moving parts. You might see one linebacker on the field. You might see a bunch of defensive backs. You might see an extra flat defender, Zach Baun. It's going to be very mix and match in the back seven from week to week.
Yeah, so we'll see what they end up doing there, John. Any other players right now that are going to be a point of emphasis to watch tonight. And it is tough. I mean, even the guys you want to watch, it's like, if they're playing versus the second and third string teams of the Patriots, how good is the competition? But they are all NFL guys. I try not to put too much stock in that. If they play good, they play good. And if they don't, they don't. And take it for what it's worth and keep moving forward. But any other players right now, John, that are sticking out that you want to watch tonight? Maybe some back-end roster guys, maybe some guys that are on the bubble trying to get to that 100%.
Well, and I would say when you talk about the best NFL team versus the worst NFL team, I actually think it's far more. There's more parity on the back end of the roster. In other words, the difference tends to be with that first 15 guys, your first 15 players, the stars or the key contributors. Those are, the Eagles' stars are much better than the Patriots, to put it mildly. But when you get to 16 to 53, NFL is like dead even from roster to roster to roster. So yeah. That I don't believe there's a huge difference between the Patriots and the Eagles from that perspective. And guys, I said it week 1. Here we are again, week 2 in the preseason. Anais Smith, make a damn play. Change the narrative. All it took was Eli Ricks to make one play in Baltimore to change the narrative. If Howie Roseman thinks somebody will say, let's say our buddy James Carver's a GM out there and, he returns a punt for a touchdown. That's it. He's going to keep him because he's going to be worried that somebody's going to claim him on waivers. And you can piecemeal it in a different way now with all the liberalized roster rules. You can say, well, John Ross is going to play. Let's pretend they don't go outside the organization. And let's say AJ sprains an ankle. Well, Anais Smith ain't playing. Johnny Wilson ain't playing. But you got to keep them because they got to go through waivers. And then maybe you have John Ross, you wink it as a vested guy and say, hey, we're going to put you on the practice squad, and then we're going to elevate you to play the game. So it's a lot. You can do a lot more like that. It's less fun, by the way, when it comes to building rosters because it's much easier. But I digress. So there's a lot of different ways you can go, but he's got to make a damn play, Anais Smith. Like if he doesn't do anything for the rest of the summer, he's done. He's cut. But Eli Ricks has proven if you do something in front of the camera, they will keep you. If they think there's any chance that somebody's going to claim you on waivers.
Yeah, because that's what plays into it most parts of doing it on camera is that everybody else will get you, and once somebody else wants you, you become more valuable where you are. So, look, I don't know. You think Anais will play a lot of receiver tonight, or is he mostly going to be on the kick returns? And I mean, he's got to make a play, I think, on in the slot or something.
No, yeah, he's going to play a ton at receiver, and yeah, he's got to do something, and it can't be any more drops. That's got to stop. And it's, again, we'll see if they try to push the football down the field a little bit more. And he gets that opportunity, but if he's out there, for him specifically, he's got to make a play.
We'll see if he's able to do that. John, we'll take another commercial break, and then we'll have one more segment to go before we get to Brandon Lee Gouton. VLG was at the joint practice, by the way, in New England. So we'll get a guy from the practice. So let's see what he got, what he saw from the joint practice, see what he took away from that. We'll get to our next commercial break. I want to thank everybody in the chat for being here. Appreciate all you guys. Make sure you hit that like button. I don't know what we're up to right now, but over 300 watching on YouTube. So pretty good numbers this morning. It's game day, everybody. It's a football Thursday, so stay tuned. Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.